Quebec, 1985. 5 men, 1 clubhouse, bodies wrapped in sleeping bags at the bottom of a river. The Lennoxville massacre should have ended everything, but instead, it sparked a war. Salvatore Cazzetta watched his world turn to ashes. The Hells Angels had crossed an unthinkable line, killing their own brothers in cold blood. He refused to join them. Instead, he built something new, the Rock Machine. What followed was 8 years of bloodshed, bombs, shootings, more than 160 dead. Quebec became a battlefield. The Rock Machine fought, lost, and disappeared. But in 2006, another massacre reshaped everything. This time it was the Bandidos, supposed saviors who turned on each other at Shedden Farm. 8 more bodies, another betrayal. From those ashes, the impossible happened. The Rock Machine name rose again. This documentary tells the story of how a defeated club refused to stay buried. We'll trace their journey from near extinction to unexpected revival, revisiting the brutal Quebec Biker War of the 1990s and early 2000s, a conflict that left over 100 people dead and nearly wiped the club off the map. We'll look at how their absorption into the Bandidos was meant to save them, but instead erased their identity. Along the way, we'll examine pivotal turning points. The Lennoxville massacre that set the stage, their bloody rivalry with the Hells Angels, and the patchover that transformed them into Bandidos. Finally, we'll explore how the shocking Shedden massacre in 2006 created the opportunity for the Rock Machine to return. Everything presented here is grounded in historical accounts, legal records, and respected reporting. No myths, only the real story of how a club once thought extinct clawed its way back through determination, nostalgia, and the will to reclaim a lost identity. To understand the Rock Machine's rebirth, we must begin with the violence that set the stage. In March 1985, the Hells Angels carried out what became known as the Lennoxville Massacre. 5 members of their own North chapter were slaughtered at a clubhouse near Sherbrooke, Quebec. Their bodies were stuffed into sleeping bags and dumped in a river. These killings weren't against rivals. They were against their own men, punished for recklessness that had drawn too much police attention. The massacre shocked Canada. It revealed the ruthless measures the Hells Angels were willing to take to maintain control, and it left many in the biker world disgusted. Among those disturbed was Salvatore Cazzetta, a Montreal biker with strong underworld connections. Along with his brother Giovanni, he had ties to other motorcycle clubs and organized crime circles in Quebec. But after Lennoxville, Salvatore refused to pledge loyalty to a club that could murder its own so coldly. In 1986, the Cazzetta brothers founded their own club, the Rock Machine. Based in Montreal, it attracted men who wanted the brotherhood of biker culture without bowing to the Hells Angels' violent dominance. From the start, the Rock Machine positioned itself as a rival force, pulling in members from street gangs, former club members, and organized crime associates. Their rise was fueled not only by pride, but also by Montreal's booming drug trade. By rejecting the Angels, the Cazzettas planted the seeds of one of Canada's bloodiest turf wars. The Hells Angels were feared, but distrusted. The Rock Machine emerged as a bold alternative. What began as resistance to a massacre would soon escalate into open war. By the early 1990s, tensions exploded. The uneasy balance collapsed, and Montreal's lucrative drug trade became the battlefield. In 1994, the Quebec Biker War began, lasting nearly a decade. The Hells Angels, one of the most feared clubs in the world, moved aggressively to dominate the market. The Rock Machine refused to yield. The result was a campaign of bombings, shootings, and arson that turned Quebec into a war zone. Car bombs tore through businesses and homes. Drive-by shootings left bodies in the streets. In 1995, an 11-year-old boy, Daniel Desrochers, was killed when a car packed with explosives detonated near a community center, an innocent casualty that shocked the nation. Law enforcement estimated more than 160 people were killed during the conflict, with hundreds more wounded. Montreal lived under siege. Bomb squads became a regular sight. Families feared being caught in the crossfire. The Rock Machine, though outnumbered, held firm. They gained support from street gangs like the Pelletier clan and sought alliances abroad, eventually turning to the Bandidos in Europe and the U.S. for protection. The Hells Angels responded with overwhelming firepower, unleashing their nomad chapter, elite enforcers chosen to crush rivals. The war wasn't just about drugs, it was about total control of Montreal's underworld. For nearly 8 years, Quebec was consumed by violence. By the early 2000s, the Rock Machine was battered and on the verge of collapse. By the late 1990s, the Rock Machine was running out of options. Outnumbered, outgunned, and facing relentless assaults, their leaders were jailed or killed, and their hold on Montreal was slipping away. In 1999, the club made a desperate but strategic move, a patch-over agreement with the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, joining one of the Hells Angels' biggest international rivals, offered protection and global backing. By January 2001, all Rock Machine members had formally patched into the Bandidos during a ceremony at the Kingston Clubhouse. But this survival came at a cost. The Rock Machine name disappeared. What had once been a proud symbol of defiance was absorbed into a larger organization. The patchover was meant to save them, but in reality, it marked the end of their independent identity. By 2002, as police operations closed the Quebec Biker War, the Rock Machine existed only as a memory, its name buried under Bandido colors. The story might have ended there, but fate had other plans. On April 8, 2006, Canada's underworld was rocked by the Shedden Massacre. At a rural farm in Ontario, 8 Bandidos members and associates were murdered by their own brothers in a violent internal purge. The massacre left the Bandidos shattered in Canada, and from that collapse, an opportunity emerged. The Rock Machine name, long thought dead, was resurrected. What followed was a revival no one expected. A club erased by war and betrayal clawed its way back into existence, driven by determination, nostalgia, and the refusal to let history end in silence. The killings carried out by fellow Bandidos revealed deep fractures within the Canadian branch of the club. The Shedden Massacre devastated Bandidos Canada. Trust collapsed, leadership fractured, and by October 2007, the organization shut down completely. An announcement on their website read, "As of October 2, 2007, the Bandidos MC 1% Canada is officially shut down. There is no more Bandidos MC membership in Canada." For former Rock Machine members who had been absorbed into the Bandidos, this collapse was both a tragedy and an opportunity. They had surrendered their original identity to join what they believed was a stronger organization, only to watch that organization implode through internal violence. Many felt betrayed by the American Bandidos leadership, whom they suspected of involvement in the Shedden killings. With the Canadian chapter destroyed, a vacuum was created. Former Rock Machine veterans, suddenly without a club, began to recall what they had lost when they gave up their original colors. The Rock Machine had been born in defiance of the Hells Angels' brutality at Lennoxville. Now it could be reborn in defiance of the Bandidos' collapse at Shedden. By early 2008, something once thought impossible began to take shape. Dispersed former members started discussing the revival of the Rock Machine. In April, several disgruntled ex-Bandidos, including members of the defunct No Surrender crew, announced they were reorganizing under the Rock Machine banner. At the forefront of this effort were Ron Burling, who had led the Winnipeg Bandidos after the previous president's arrest, and Sean Crazy Dog Brown, who played a key role in rebuilding the club. The revival was more than nostalgia. It was a deliberate act of defiance against American Bandidos leadership, particularly National President Jeffrey Pike. By reclaiming the Rock Machine name, Canadian bikers sent a message. They would rather resurrect their defeated former club than remain loyal to an organization that had betrayed them. Momentum quickly grew. The reborn Rock Machine adopted its original black and platinum colors and re-established itself as Rock Machine Canada Nomads before expanding across the country. Despite the return, the new Rock Machine was not the same as the original. Journalist Jerry Langton and others reported that this second version had no direct connection to the first beyond the name and the patch. The club's own website reflected this disconnection. Its memorial section honored the 8 bandidos killed at Shedden, but did not mention Rock Machine members lost during the Quebec Biker War. The revival successfully reclaimed symbols, but it could not reclaim the history or the men who built it. What emerged was essentially a new organization wearing an old identity, linked by name and imagery but not by blood or shared experience. By 2008, the world had changed. Law enforcement was stronger, public tolerance for biker violence had eroded, and the internet had transformed criminal organizations. Much of the Rock Machine's modern presence has been digital. While the club claims chapters in Canada, the US, Germany, and Australia, investigators suggest that many exist largely online. Social media and websites became tools to project strength, but actual membership and influence remain far below the peak of the original Rock Machine. Unlike its predecessor, which controlled drug markets and territory in Montreal, the modern Rock Machine operates in a far more fragmented environment. The club insists it is now focused on motorcycle enthusiasm and legitimate activities, claiming to expel members involved in crime. Law enforcement and journalists remain skeptical, noting that outlaw motorcycle clubs rarely separate themselves entirely from their criminal past. Still, the modern Rock Machine achieved its symbolic goal, proving that its name could not be erased. At the heart of the Rock Machine's identity is its motto, à la vie, à la mort, to life, until death. For today's Rock Machine, the phrase means more than brotherhood. It represents the refusal to let the name itself die, even after absorption into another club and near extinction. The revival has become part of outlaw biker mythology, a story of how names and symbols can outlive the organizations that created them. In this world, identity can be just as powerful as numbers or territory. The Rock Machine's return demonstrates that outlaw motorcycle clubs are not merely criminal enterprises, but cultural movements built on loyalty, mythology, and shared identity. Even after betrayal, collapse, and years in the shadows, these elements can bring a club back to life. The rebirth of the Rock Machine is significant, not for what it achieved afterward, but for the fact that it happened at all. Few clubs have faced as total a defeat as the Rock Machine did after its patchover to the Bandidos. The name disappeared. Members traded their colors. The organization ceased to exist. Yet within a few years of the Bandidos' collapse, the Rock Machine returned. For law enforcement, this showed that dismantling a structure does not necessarily eliminate its influence. Names, symbols, and myths can be revived by new generations who connect with what they represent. For outlaw biker culture, it proved that no club name is ever truly dead, so long as someone remembers what it stood for. The modern Rock Machine faces the challenge of living up to a legendary name in a very different environment. The original fought the Hells Angels for control of Montreal's drug trade in an era when biker violence was more tolerated. Today's club operates under relentless scrutiny in markets already dominated by powerful rivals. with law enforcement well prepared to counter them. Legitimacy remains a question. Can a club that claims to distance itself from crime still maintain credibility in outlaw culture? These contradictions highlight the difficulties of building a sustainable future around a legendary but burdened name. The Rock Machine's return is a story of identity outlasting destruction. Few outlaw clubs have been so thoroughly defeated, absorbed, and erased, yet still found their way back. The revival shows how mythology and symbols can inspire even when history and membership are gone. It also reveals a deeper truth about outlaw motorcycle culture. These clubs are not only criminal networks, but social movements. Loyalty to names, colors, and traditions can be just as strong as loyalty to leaders or places. In the end, the Rock Machine's resurrection was not born in blood, but in betrayal. The betrayal of Canadian bikers by their American counterparts at Shedden. What seemed finished after the Quebec Biker War rose again, proving that in outlaw culture, defeat is never final. Names can be buried, but they can also be exhumed. Clubs can be destroyed, but their ghosts can be given new life.